to our March 1 meeting. We're going to discuss healthcare today, as you probably know. A reminder, we do record these, so don't say anything you wouldn't want either your mother or the brown shirts to know about.
Partly funny.
For Zoom participants, if you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat. The chat button is on the bottom and looks like a bubble. Click on that and type in your comments, and we will be sure to ask the speakers your questions. We have first-time attendees that are willing to stand up and loudly say your name and maybe why you're here or what worries you or interests you.
Yeah, my name is Martin Volker. I'm over at Jefferson Unitarian Church, and I invited Robin and Allison to speak at our church on the 15th in order to tell people how resistance happens through action and how Arvadans for Progressive Action are doing just that.
Other new folks.
Young man, Tea Garden, fairly recently retired social work, social worker. Yeah, just doing the race.
You're in the right place.
Yeah.
Your first name is Matt?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we want to use the mic?
And I'm not familiar with the mic. If you'd like to be the mic passer, it's now powered on. Oh, okay. Okay. Other people at the first meeting.
My name is Beth Brummer. I'm newly in Colorado. I recently moved from Arizona, so looking to get involved here. Thank you.
Craig James, first time here. I've been retired for about 2 years, but just want to get a feel for the group, see what you guys are about.
Welcome.
Hi, Patrick Bowen.
My wife, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
We're just
Fed up and want to be around other people instead of just ourselves.
I don't know about this mic.
I don't either. This is an experiment in progress.
Some chairs up here.
Well, and if you need more chairs, we can set them up too.
Yeah, come to the front for better hearing.
Do we have any elected officials or candidates here? Okay, sometimes we do. Today we don't. That works. Speakers, please pay attention to Julie Callahan here in the front row. She's going to have signs that will tell you when you've got a minute or two left and when you're out of time. This group was founded during a dark time when Trump 1 was on the horizon. And we're in another dark time now, obviously. We have a tradition of sharing what keeps us up at night and what gives us hope. I will start. One of the things that keeps me up at night is the fact that the Supreme Court's decision in whatever case gets to them that matters most in the next 6 months is going to be a really big turning point. And I hear that they're not up to it. What keeps you up at night or gives you hope? Again, speak very loudly, ideally into the owl here, which sends your words to our online folks. Oh, nobody's worried. That's great.
I'm sick of being worried. I mean, I'm very worried, but one thing that gave me a lot of hope this week was seeing the protests at town halls of Republican strongholds in U.S. Congress. So I keep up the pressure. Gabe Evans decided not to do a town hall, and so people protested outside of his office anyways. So I think it's important that the red districts hear from us, but also Colorado Springs started an Indivisible group. I'm helping prop up their website, and they had 500 people at their meeting this week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's for all of Colorado Springs. It's their first Indivisible group, but people are showing up. So that gives me hope. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. Hopes and fears. Yes. Thank you for coming forward.
I've been on the Zooms and they can't hear us. I'm Emily, and what keeps me up at night is that there's nothing we can do. I fear that calling our own Congress people is a little bit wasted because we have such good support. And so I'm struggling to figure out, can I call Republicans I don't know in whose districts I don't exist? So the question I have and what keeps me up at night is there's nothing we can do. And I don't want to believe that.
Well, maybe we can get some hope sharers who've tried something to do and are feeling good about it.
Hi, I'm Sebastian. Something that gives me hope is Colorado, I believe it's District 7 rep, Brittany Pedersen. She showed up to a vote, even though they tried to suppress it. They told her she wasn't able to vote. Teleconference, and she showed up with her newborn son, I believe 3 weeks after he was born, and I think that's powerful and inspirational. That gives me hope.
Good, yeah. Feels like first grade show and tell. My name is Nancy. Last,
So they can see you also as a camera.
Granddaughter ran around roughly the intersection of 72nd and Federal last week, offering these red cards to businesses for their staff, their customers, and their family, anybody they wanted to give them to, in Spanish and English, advising them what to do in case of an ICE raid or being challenged at their own door, whatever. And they were very well received. One person wasn't so happy to see us. I would love to describe his business to you, but we won't go there. Anyway, people knew what they were. Oh, you've got red cards. We leave 10 at a time. But they're really, really valued out there to let them know we care too. So that's all.
We could go on forever with this topic, but we have a 6-minute limit, so that was it. But after the meeting, feel free to mingle and share your fears and your hopes with whoever you choose to talk to. We collect money at each meeting to pay for this room, as well as our Zoom system, our email system, and so forth. So that's passing around. You can contribute what you are able to. And next, we're going to do announcements from our from our team leaders, starting with Allison Phipps.
I don't have any. That's okay.
Next time.
Next. All right. Okay. Actually wrote this down. Of course, I never had.
I'm Allison Phipps. I am the communications team lead as well as the education team lead, so I go twice. I just want to start off with this one quote that has been helping me stay grounded during all of this, because everything can feel really overwhelming. I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. I will not let what I cannot do interfere with what I can do. So creating community like this in itself is an act of resistance. So I don't want to, you just being here is something. And then what do we do with that something? We have had over 150 new members join APA since November. Before you leave, meet somebody in this room that you have not talked to before, you do not know, and ask them why they're here, what brought you here. Creating community, knowing people to turn to at this time is very important. So that's my communications pitch for all of us, to just get to know each other. I've met more people in the community in the last 3 months. And it's been powerful. It's building community and getting to know people. For communications, we primarily use email, our website, and Facebook. Some people are leaving Facebook right now, which is okay. I fully support that. We are going to keep using Facebook as long as it's useful for us to communicate, because we do have a private group. It's not open to the public. Members can post their own content, share stories, that sort of thing. But we are looking into maybe using Blue Sky or Reddit. I don't know, but I would love a volunteer who would be willing to set up and run our Blue Sky account or a Reddit account and just get it started, so we could maybe explore using something other than Facebook. So we're gonna continue using Facebook right now, but if you would like to volunteer for that, please see me after. Okay, now moving on to education. So for education team updates, we have joined forces with Engage Jeffco, which is a new parent group for the entire Jeffco school district. So a lot of APA members, I see some in the room that came to meet with district rep Daniel Varda. So that meeting went well. We were able to talk to her about some important things, and we want to keep that conversation going. Also, Engage Jeffco and APA went to the last school board meeting to talk about why the district had not gotten official policy for what to do if ICE showed up. We spoke about that, and a bunch of other groups did too, some really powerful testimony. And later in that meeting, they finally adopted a resolution, and now there will be protocols posted at every single school. They're still struggling with communication as far as like some schools are communicating really well to their families, some schools are not. So we're working on pressuring them to have equal communication throughout all their schools about what's happening, and what those principals and the front staff should do. And lastly, for the education team, testimony is very important right now at the school board meetings. I want to hear from families that are impacted, not just undocumented families. There's a lot of federal risks right now. Anybody that knows a student with an IEP, a 504, using special education, mental health services, who has a non-binary or a trans kid in school, please see me. I would love to hear your story, what those students are what the district's doing right and what the district is doing wrong. Real quick, my son has a 504. I spoke at the school board meeting about the mental health services that we use and how those are really important to our family. And I had 3 people reach out to me during the meeting, after the meeting, saying, thank you for that testimony. We rarely get to hear from families who are using our mental health services and are happy with them. So I think people just hear complaints about stuff that doesn't matter. Really need to hear, we're using these services. We do not want them to go away. Please prioritize. So if you know a child who is at risk for anything or is using a service in a school, please see me. I would love your testimony. You don't have to do it alone. You could do it with our group. Our group would be standing right behind you, so you don't have to go alone. So yeah, please come see me after the meeting. Allison Phipps. I send out, if you're on my education newsletter, I'll send out education news communications. You can reply directly to me. Or you can, see me after the meeting. I'll give you my email directly. So thank you.
Bruce Morrison, anti-war, you're up.
Yeah, as you all know, the war situation is not good in Gaza, Ukraine, and Congo, Sudan. The anti-war team was fairly active this year. We met with Brittany Pedersen. We met with her staff. We met with her on Zoom. We met with her in person. But she remains totally resistant to condemning the genocide. So we also testified City Council for a ceasefire. And we are protesting 52nd of Wadsworth every Saturday at 10 o'clock. So if you want to join us, that would be welcome. And if you have any ideas or you just want to talk about the war situation and what we can do, get with me after the meeting.
Thank you. Darlene Chang. Climate action or climate, what's her name?
Climate action.
Climate action.
Okay, thanks. So the best science has made it clear that we need to cut worldwide greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030 to keep our Earth safe and keep civilization going as we know it. Unfortunately, we're only 5 years away from that deadline, so we can't afford to wait until the next election. Now, notionally, in my mind, that also means cutting fossil fuel investment by about half and putting that money into clean energy, and also reducing the workforce in fossil fuel by half and transitioning people into clean energy. Ideally, we would get a lot of fossil fuel workers to work on clean energy infrastructure. We did help with one job last year as Arvadans for Progressive Action. We were part of Jeffco Students and Parents for Climate Action in getting the school board to get serious and hire a sustainability manager for Jeffco School District. And she's been working since August. And she's given us guidance that we really need help with getting students to the school board meetings. We're targeting April 10th to have students go there and encourage the school board to adopt a more aggressive policy for sustainability and climate action. And they've heard a lot from us parents. They're frankly tired of us and they want to hear from students. So if you know students within Jeffco schools who would like to talk, please let me know. Also, we're going to be working with 350 Colorado during their lobby day next Friday, March 7th. I sent out an email a couple of days ago inviting you on the climate action team to be a part of that, because we're going to be meeting with Lisa Foray, representative for Nevada, and also Senator Lindsay Dougherty in person on that lobby day. So if you can make it to the state capitol, we'll be meeting with them at 11 o'clock and 11:45. So please reply to the email and sign up for the 350 Colorado Lobby Day. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Joyce Richardson on political action.
Hey, I'm Joyce Richardson. I am the political action team leader. We spent a lot of time doing postcards last year. We'll be focusing on the city council races coming up. There will be 3 that will be running. Some of them are termed out, so that's a totally open seat. So that's going to be kind of fun. 2026 is coming up and statewide races are up, and there's going to be several primaries, I think, for those statewide jobs. So stay tuned. We'll get information out about that kind of probably through Facebook and also the newsletter and that kind of thing. But if you're really needing something to do right now, there is an idea of dig through your stuff, find a postcard, write what you think about Trump, mail it on March 15th to the White House. So if you have a pen, the address is the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20500. So 20500. So just do it. It'll be fun.
What's the date again? March 15th.
March 15th. So mail it on March 15th.
The Ides of March, don't sign it Brutus, that might get you.
Yeah. Holly.
Oh, is there any chance of doing some kind of postcarding thing for the Wisconsin Supreme Court race?
We can do that. Unfortunately, we'll probably have to meet at the police station. So does anybody not like that? Because, it is the police station, but it's kind of the only room that's available to us right now. The libraries are, the Arvada Library is in flux, and Stanley Lake, the big room, is busy until after tax season. So I'll try to put something together. I know that people are wanting this group to get together, so I'll try to make that happen before the end of the month. But we will also have a chance to be together on April 6th here for our next meeting.
Which is a Sunday, but we'll remind you of that before we get to April.
Those letters on the 15th, we just addressing the Trump or?
Yeah, to the president, Donald J. Trump, the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania. Tell them what you think.
I saw someone say for the president, open paren, for now close paren.
Yeah.
Julie Callahan, social.
Yeah. Keeping track of my own time, so here we go. My name is Julie, I'm Social Connections. I want to encourage everybody to keep calling, and I'll tell you why. According to AOC, those phone calls matter. Even if you're not gonna change their mind, you put pressure on them. And if we stop calling and Republicans start calling, we want to be the ones putting the pressure on, okay? Keep your eyes open for national things, day of strike, day protest, keep your eyes open, respond accordingly. Our next banned book club is going to be, the book will be Of Mice and Men. It will be at my house this coming Thursday from 3 to 4:30. You can RSVP to my cell phone or on Facebook. On next Saturday, we're having coffee at La Dolce Vita in Old Town. It was at 9 o'clock. I'm moving it to 8, from 8 to 9:30, because some people want to go to Bruce's Peace March, right? So I don't want to cut into that. We're gonna try and have coffee every 2 weeks. So then the following coffee will be on the 22nd. If 8 o'clock goes well, we will keep it at there. If people aren't gonna go to the march, we may move it back. On March 30th, we're going to have a meeting called Strategies for Coping with the Ongoing Trauma of the Next 4 Years. Right now, there's like 3 people who've signed up. It'll be at my house. If we get more people, we're gonna try and move it to a venue like this. I really thought a lot of people would be interested because it's being taught by a therapist. And so she knows what she's talking about. She will give you strategies, ways to encourage ourselves.
Facebook?
What's that?
Is that on Facebook?
It is on Facebook.
Okay.
And I'll also, again, for people who aren't on Facebook, I'll try and put it in the newsletter and you can just text me directly. Our book for April is going to be The World According to Garp. In May, it's going to be Toni Morrison, Blue Eyes. And in June, it's going to be James.
Wow.
Thank you. Yes.
Could I just encourage people to come to the book group if you would like? And if you haven't read the book or you read it in high school and don't remember that, come anyway. We've got really good conversations. So I encourage people to come. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gage. And we are now to the heart of our meeting, and Kathy Blake is taking charge at this point.
Thank you, Jim.
I'm Kathy Blake, the Healthcare Action Team Leader. And so my first question to you guys is, what was your reaction when you heard about the shooting of the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson?
You know, we all cheered,
Honestly.
right? I mean, not literally for his death, but
Right.
the symbolism.
Yeah. Well, the United Healthcare put a Facebook post mourning him, and it had over 80% of laughter emojis. One person wrote, "Today we mourn the deaths of the 68,000 Americans who needlessly die each year so that insurance company executives can become multimillionaires." Most of us want to help people, not hurt people. I've been advocating for universal single-payer healthcare for over 17 years. It's sad that it took an incident like the murder of a healthcare CEO to finally voice how angry and frustrated a lot of us are, people that have to use the system, are with the healthcare system that provides less and less care for more and more money. Thompson was a symbol of the oppressive system that does not make money by providing care. It makes money by denying care. Corporate monopolies have rigged the system, consolidating the power over your and my health by middlemen who are profiteers. The result, skyrocketing premiums, denied treatments, collapsing independent practices. For example, in the 1980s in Boulder, there were 200 independent doctors. Today, there's only 5 independent practitioners in Boulder. Today, we have 3 speakers from the medical world who will share their experience and views on improving healthcare and how you can help. Our first speaker, Dr. Vince Markovchick, was a past director of emergency medical services at Denver Health. He practiced there for 32 years. He's an officer at the Healthcare for All Colorado Foundation. He speaks locally and nationally. He will explore the unsustainably high cost of healthcare, much of which is due to fraud, waste, and abuse by private health insurers, private equity firms, drug companies, and hospitals. Our second speaker, Dr. Madeleine Jacobs, and that's her picture right there, was a rural family physician for 28 years. Currently, she serves on the board for the Colorado Foundation for Universal Healthcare and leads a medical professional group. Kavya Ganathula is a fourth-year medical student and Master of Public Health candidate dedicated to advancing universal healthcare. She has testified recently advocating for policies ensuring equal access for all Coloradans. And you'll hear more about Senate Bill 045 soon. Our healthcare system is killing us. Let's do something about it. And I have flyers up here for more information, and I'm going to pass around some, but I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Markovchick.
Let's see if this is working without feedback. Kathy, thank you, and thank you to this group for inviting me. I was last here in 2017, but I'm still at it. I started doing talks about healthcare back in the early to mid 80s after I was seeing, every time I worked in the emergency department, I'd see one or two patients, serious injury or illness, most of them working, who would say, how much is this going to cost and how am I going to pay, because they had no insurance. I realized this country is really screwed up, and it stayed that way until now, and it's gotten worse. We don't have a healthcare system, we have a healthcare marketplace. I'm going to address waste, fraud, and abuse, which is a very contemporary issue now, but they're targeting the wrong stuff. They want to do healthcare, stay away from Medicaid. I'll tell them where to go. Can we have first? We got the slide. Next slide. Next slide. I think everybody knows what waste is. It's common sense, but in healthcare, there's a lot of waste. Too many procedures that are unnecessary. Too many hospitals with unfilled beds. Freestanding ERs and medical helicopters. We have too many of those. Duplication of technology. The big one is overpaid administrators and the medical industrial complex lobbying. Next slide. And of course, the private insurance overhead. We'll get into that in a little more. Examples of waste is 25% hospital overhead and profit, which is twice that in hospitals in other countries in the developed world. We're paying far too much for administrative overhead. Medicare Advantage subsidies, this is billions of dollars a year that the private insurers are sucking out of Medicare in the form of subsidies. And they're also committing fraud because of it. Obamacare administrative overhead is a lot of money as well. And of course, billing and collecting from private insurers. Next slide. How can we reduce waste in healthcare? This slide is a few years old, and they're talking about $1 trillion a year. We're spending $4 trillion. There's at least $1 trillion in waste, fraud, and abuse in that $4 trillion. Next slide. 1/3 is consumed by administration. Get next slide. Private insurers. The waste in private insurance is claims processing with the goal of minimizing payments. In other words, insure the healthy, avoid the sick, and deny pre-existing permissions. Marketing, look at all the ads on TV. It is just insane for healthcare, for insurance companies. The money they spend on lobbying and this administrative salaries. Next slide. Next slide. Is it working?
No. This is subsidies for just private health insurance. And most of it is Obamacare. And the other part of it is Medicare Advantage. Those two. Next slide. It's cheaper to enroll Americans in Medicaid, much cheaper than it is to subsidize the private insurance companies. That's what this slide shows. Next slide. We spend over 800 billion a year just filing healthcare paperwork. The billing that doctors and hospitals have to do to get private insurance companies to pay, and all the stuff that goes back and forth. Next slide. Here's just a stark example. Duke University employs 1,600 billing clerks for their 950 bed hospital. A similar sized hospital in Canada employs 8 billing clerks. I have friends in Canada working in emergency medicine, and I say to them, how's your billing and collecting? They said, fine. How much does it cost you? They said, $2 a bill. How soon you get paid? They said 2 to 4 weeks. And what's your reimbursement rate? They said 98%. Imagine how efficient that system is. Next slide. 12 million hours on the phone with insurance companies every week. This is patients and providers dealing with insurance companies. Next slide. Private Medicare Advantage plans have this huge overhead built in compared to Medicare. For Medicare, 147, the private insurers, 1450. That's a huge amount of waste. There's no reason for that except to make money for private insurance companies. Next slide. Now, fraud. Everybody kind of knows what that is. That's illegal, unlawful gain. The examples in medicine are upcoding and risk adjustment. We don't have time to get into it. This is a 2-hour talk I'm trying to condense into 20 minutes. And I do it for Ollie as part of an 8-hour class. But anyway, the insurance billing we talked about, drug marketing and off-label prescribing and the fraud that goes into that, kickbacks to providers, a lot of scams in hospice and home health care, where they basically are billing for services that that are never made. They steal in Medicare numbers and they bill. Addiction treatment, there's a lot of addiction treatment scams now with addiction treatment centers that are doing the same thing, and medical equipment and ambulance scams. Next slide. Again, fraudulent billing. The landmark case for hospital fraudulent billing is 2003, when HCA, which was Columbia Healthcare at that time, got hit with a $1.7 billion fine for fraudulent billing and upcoding. Who was the CEO of Columbia Hospital? Does anybody know?
Rick Scott.
Rick Scott. Next slide. Yeah, here he is doing his deposition. He took the Fifth Amendment 75 times, and he claimed that he didn't know all his hospitals were committing fraud. He's just the CEO. Next slide. And so he went on to become governor of Florida, where he has blocked Medicaid expansion, and I believe it's still blocked in Florida. And now he's a big-time senator. Next slide. And just this last year, he said he was being persecuted over this Medicare fraud stuff. Next slide. Medicare Advantage is neither Medicare nor an advantage. It's a misnomer. Next slide. They overbill taxpayers by billions annually. Next slide. Here's United Healthcare, one of their fraudulent billing issues that the DOJ has brought against them. Next slide. Kaiser's involved too. Kaiser, California has got hit with fraudulent billing case. Next slide. UC Health, just recently, 23 million they paid. All these companies or corporations, they pay the money and they say we didn't do anything wrong.
We're just giving you your billions and millions over, and nobody ever goes to jail. That would fix the problem quickly. Next slide. Here's DaVita. DaVita's up to over $100 million of fraud paid back to the Justice Department for 3 different major fraud cases, and they're based here in Denver. Next slide. The way this upcoding scam with Medicare Advantage goes, and they offered me a job doing this when I retired, is a person signs up for Medicare Advantage. They would send out, they were trying to send out doctors, but they also will send out nurse practitioners to the person's home with this questionnaire. And they go through all the questions, and they ask questions like, do you ever have any joint pain? Find me a 65-year-old that doesn't have joint pain. Okay. Of course, they say yes. They code it as arthritis, even though it doesn't require any treatment. And all that stuff just goes on, and it costs billions of dollars, and that's fraudulent. Next slide. This is some of the billing frauds. This 1-hour nurse visit I just talked about, that's to upcode with this questionnaire. Next slide. The insurers pocketed $50 billion from Medicare for diseases no doctor treated, and that's what I mentioned. They list these as all diseases. Medicare has agreed to pay the private insurers more for sicker patients. They make them look sick on paper, and they're not. Next slide. Oh, this is a good one. Pharmaceutical company fraud. They look at it simply, it's like a speeding ticket. It's the cost of doing business. Off-label marketing is the most common. That means a drug is approved for a specific condition, like the treatment of seizures or the treatment of psychosis or schizophrenia. And they start marketing for, wouldn't this psychosis drug be great for patients in nursing homes that are having difficulty coping and are a little disruptive? And the off-label marketing often makes them far more money than the reason the drug was approved in the first place. Puts patients at risk. Nobody goes to jail. Next slide. It's too hard to see, but this is the billions of dollars in reimbursement for fraud from all these companies. It ranges from 9 billion to 1.6 billion. And this is over a period of about 5 years. Next slide. Abuse. This is a big one. Abuse is not illegal. Abuse is abuse. Well, where does it come in? It is pervasive throughout the whole healthcare industry, involving hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, ambulance services, and it just is incredible what's going on. Let me give you some examples. Next slide. Facility fees. This is a huge one. Originally, facility fees were only charged for emergency departments that had a high overhead because of our staffing 24 hours a day. And so in addition to the medical care bill, they would charge a facility fee. Now what's happening with practices being taken over by hospitals, once a practice becomes under a hospital umbrella, even though it may be in the same building in Arvada, it's been for years, the same doctor, your bill can go up by 10 times because now it's a hospital facility. And that's just incredible what they're doing with that. Next slide. Here it is. Here's a charge to cost ratio. The cost is based on Medicare reimbursement. You can see virtually every HCA hospital is at the top of this list, and they're charging 7 times more than Medicare pays. And that's not really what would cost them to provide the service. Next slide. Here is from the website, Colorado Hospital Association. The hospital charge for uncomplicated laparoscopic appendectomy which is a quick trip to the OR, maybe an hour or two, maybe an overnight stay in the hospital and home. This doesn't include the surgeon or the anesthesiologist. It ranges from 22,000 to 95,000. The hospital charge. That's why I titled my talk on waste, fraud, or on how healthy is our healthcare? Why do we pay so much? And why you should get your appendectomy in the Arkansas Valley La Junta Hospital. Next slide.
So that was before actual services, before.
Oh, that's just the hospital charges. Their services there. The patient gets admitted, goes to the operating room, goes home. Here's a knee replacement bill from St. Joe's. Surgery one morning, admission to the hospital overnight, home the next day. $69,000, $70,000. Kaiser paid 25% because insurers negotiate good discounts. Don't have insurance, you're screwed, particularly the young people with appendicitis. Next slide. Here's a 5-minute visit to Swedish ER, a $5,000 bill. A guy fell, hit his head, was concerned about a concussion, whether anything. They evaluated him and said, there's no indication, we don't need to do a CAT scan, you can go home. This is the bill. Next slide. Here's a $60,000 ambulance bill from the children's ER south of Denver to Aurora of a child who the ER down in the hospital down south said they need to send a kid to the Aurora hospital. They authorized, the caregivers authorized an ambulance, and that's the bill for about a 30-mile flight. And that's because private companies have taken over virtually all medical helicopters. Next slide. Here's a Supreme Court ruling where a lady up front for elective surgery went to the hospital and said, exactly how much is it going to cost me? I have good insurance. She was told it was going to cost her $1,337, and she got a bill for $300,000. They sent her to collection. This went to the Supreme Court and she won. Why do we have to do this stuff? Next slide. Next slide. The scam in Florida is most private hospitals are now owned by Hospital Corporation of America, and their scam is in caring for trauma patients. There's a thing called trauma alert and trauma activation, which I worked with for 40 years at Denver Health for patients who have serious trauma patients. They number one, they charge far too much. Number two, that's what this slide is. For example, they'll say any patient over 50 years old that has any trauma whatsoever, fell off his bike and injured his knee or his elbow, but comes by ambulance, is a trauma alert. 25% of these trauma alerts get sent home from the hospital, from the ER. They don't even get admitted. Next slide.
Just 1 second.
This is the CEO pay. It's just out of control. Next slide.
Hold on.
Yeah, the CEOs do very well. They pay themselves very, very well.
Hold on, sorry.
There's the lowest paid CEO in the Denver area that I know about is Denver Health, and I think she was getting 800,000. It may be closer to $1 million. That's the lowest paid CEO.
Oh, she's a woman, so.
Yeah.
That's a
Okay, this is during the pandemic, they raked in 3.2 billion. Next slide. Oh, this is the big one right now. Private equity is taking over medicine. And what that is a middleman whose only purpose in life is to make a bunch of money. And they don't care how they do it. They got control of the billing. They got control of the collection. Next slide. Okay, next slide. These are the highest paid CEOs. Next slide.
I gotta get here. So private equity is ruining American healthcare. Next slide. And next slide. That's this monster. Okay, private equity. Most of the private EDs in the Denver area are now under private equity control. Next slide. Next slide. This is a case out of the Springs. Pharma abuse. Next slide. It's just charging whatever they damn well please for a drug. And some of these drugs, next slide. This one is life-saving. One company makes it. And if the patient with AIDS doesn't get it, he can die. And this guy, Shkrovi, whatever his name was, he bought the company, and this is what he did to the cost for one pill. Next slide. Here's a blood clot medicine. Well, hemophilia medicine. 3.5 million is the cost for the med. Next slide. Benefit managers, again, they're middlemen ripping off drugs. Next slide. We don't have time for this. Next slide. Impediments, special interest money. There's a lot of money in that $4 trillion pot, and there's a lot of people getting rich and not providing any health care whatsoever. And they're not going to give that up easily. And certainly our legislators are getting paid off by incredible contributions from the healthcare medical industrial complex. Next slide. This is what medicine spends on lobbying compared to every other company. The red bar. Next slide. Open secrets is where you can find out. Time is up. I'm done. Yeah, let's go through. Oh, if anybody wants me to come do a little longer talk, like an hour or so, please contact Kathy. She'll put you in contact with me. I forgot to bring my cards. And I have slides. I will travel. Maybe you got something to drink and something to eat. That's would be nice. But anyway, I'll be happy to come out and talk to anybody on any of these topics.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Madeleine Jacobs, and she is online. So we're gonna have Tara take it over there.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I do have rural internet. I'm going to try to turn on my video, but if it doesn't work, I'll have to turn it off. It's not because I don't want you to see me. So here we go. So thank you, Vince. I always love your talks, and they're full of information. He's been working on this a long time. A lot of people have been working on this for decades, but the effort to get a single payer universal healthcare system actually dates back to Truman. So it's been going on for a long time. And unfortunately, things seem to be going backwards. But I will update you on our Senate bill at the end of my comments, so you guys know what's happening in Colorado. So as Kathy remarked, I was a family physician in a rural area in Fremont County for 30 years, actually, but that doesn't matter. And I loved being a doctor, but it just has really deteriorated over the last 20 years or so, and it seems to be accelerating in this deterioration. One thing Vince did remark on, I don't know if any of you know about Wendell Potter's newsletter, Healthcare Uncovered, and he just had, or one of his colleagues had a column about the pharmaceutical ripoff that Medicare companies are doing, and there's loopholes. So for a $70 prescription, they got $17,000. So it's a free newsletter. If people are interested in that, it comes out about weekly, and it's really good coverage on what's going on in this country. So my point of view, Kathy asked me to tell you horror stories from my experiences in practice. And so I'm kind of going from this from a provider point of view. And one of the things that's going on for healthcare providers across the board, which is one reason why I started Medical Professionals for Universal Healthcare, which is also now the Colorado chapter for PNHP, Physicians for National Health Plan, is to give support to healthcare workers. A statistic came out a few years ago that physicians have a higher suicide rate than combat veterans in this country, and that has only gotten worse. And again, it's across the board for all healthcare providers, and people are leaving because they aren't allowed to do what they were trained to do, which is called moral injury. And that has become a huge problem. These corporate entities say, well, just, take a yoga class, breathe some aromatherapy, and you'll be fine, honey. And you're just a weak little doctor who doesn't know how to handle stress. So we'll help you through this burnout. And that has become an increasing problem. Like I said, a lot of people are committing suicide. And like I said, qualified people are leaving. And the corporate response is to have less and less on-hands care. I just found out this past week that medical students are no longer taught how to auscultate hearts because they can just get an echocardiogram, which of course is more money for the corporation. And we have all these people who are playing doctor, and I don't mean that in drug. There, I know a lot of really good physician's assistants and many, many, many excellent nurse practitioners who have a lot of training. Unfortunately, the physician's assistants only have a couple years of training, but they're being put into these situations that they simply don't have the experience for. And so that is another ongoing thing. So let me just run through my horror stories here for you. One of the ones I always tell is in my last year of practice, one reason that I quit was I had 3 people who weren't yet on Medicare who didn't get colonoscopies because if they find something wrong, they charge you a huge amount of money, and a lot of private insurance does not cover colonoscopies. So I had 3 people between the ages of 50 and 65 die of colon cancer because they couldn't afford a colonoscopy. After not having any asthmatics in the hospital for 25 years, I had 3 people end up on ventilators because they couldn't afford their medication. I had a patient come in who had been my patient for quite some time, and she was pretty healthy. She was in her 40s, and she did have health insurance, but the deductible was $8,000. And she came in horrible shape. It was new onset rheumatoid arthritis. She had swollen, red, painful joints. She had difficulty standing, walking, moving in any way whatsoever. I did know what it was, and I started calling rheumatologists so we could get her on medications and get her evaluated. And none of them would see her. And of course, a bunch of them were not in her network for her insurance. And the ones who said they would see her said she had to pay her deductible $8,000 up front before they would see her. This would never happen in Canada or any other country that has universal health care. Finally, after I must have called 15 or 20 doctors for her, and finally I did find someone who was willing to see her up in Colorado Springs, and I'm down about 35 miles from there. But it took a lot of effort and a lot of head banging and difficulty, and this is another treatable disease which I couldn't get treatment for. Another person lived up in the mountains, and she had COPD and needed oxygen. And of course, she lived at altitude because she lived up in the mountains. And there was no oxygen company willing to provide her oxygen because she happened to live in a place that didn't have any coverage by private oxygen companies. And again, we kind of had to call people and find out if people had oxygen tanks that could be taken up to her and volunteers to go bring her oxygen. And this is in the middle of the state of Colorado. And it took, a couple weeks to do that. Another example is I have a lot of family around the world, in different countries, and they all have better access to health care than we do here in the United States. And my last story will address that. But this was, my brother actually lived in Australia, and he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The way that he was diagnosed is he got jaundiced yellow, and his wife noticed it. He went into his family physician the next day. That day, he was admitted to the hospital of his choice, and worked up in the hospital. Within the week, had surgery and was started on chemo, and he did really well for a few years, which is pretty amazing for pancreatic cancer. The American version of that was a man here in my county who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer by an ER visit. He could not get into a oncologist because of the limitations on his provider networks for his insurance for 6 months, which is basically a death sentence for pancreatic cancer. And that is the difference between this country and other countries who have universal health care. And then the final story is, and it's not the final one, I'm just giving you a few examples. I have a lot more where these came from. The last one involved my own sister, who was diagnosed with bone marrow cancer, and she needed a bone marrow transplant. And of course, the first people they look at are relatives. And the other thing in my family is we have a genetic abnormality. So they couldn't give bone marrow for someone who shared this genetic abnormality. So they had to check for the genetic abnormality before they knew if they could use other people's bone marrow. So my relatives in Canada, Australia, England, and Israel all went to their family doctors, and within a month, they all had the results on the genetic abnormality. It took me 7 months of fighting with my insurance company to get that test done in this country. So people who say, oh, we don't want universal health care because of the wait times. Well, that was a wait time, and it was an emergency. So welcome to healthcare in America. The last thing that Kathy asked me to talk about was the current bill that's going through the legislature, SB 2545. And happily, that actually has passed out of the Senate with bipartisan support, thanks to the hard work of our healthcare group down in Durango. They got their representative, who's Republican, to support it. This bill you may have heard of before. It's our analysis bill that we introduced the last 2 years and basically got timed out by the leadership of the Senate the last 2 years because he didn't want it. He was an insurance broker. He fortunately was term limited, and our current Senate president is friendly and wanted this bill to pass. Also this year, because of the budget situation, the bill did not have a fiscal note. We're going to be raising the $750,000 to do the analysis. And the purpose of the analysis, it is on top. It is the second step after the bill that we had, HB 19-1176, which was a study comparing the system we have now with a multi-payer system, public option, in other words, public option, and a single payer system. And the results of that study showed that the single payer system not only would save up to $1 billion a year, but it had better health outcomes, and it covered everyone, which neither of the two other systems do. So that went to all the legislators, and we basically were met with crickets. And people would say, well, how do we know we could do this in Colorado? And so the purpose of this analysis bill is to answer the questions of whether this could be implemented in the state of Colorado. And so we're quite excited, and I encourage all of you to contact your legislators, and let them know, ask them to support this bill, and even be co-sponsors. So I encourage you all to do that. It will be going to Health and Human Services Committee next, and we aren't sure the date on that yet. At least I'm not. So that's that on that. And again, as Vince said, I'll be happy to answer questions when we have time for that. You're up, Kathy.
Thank you, Maddie. Appreciate it. All right, so so we've had the experienced doctors kind of giving you, sort of an overview and what some experiences of what they've had in their practices. And the third person is Tavia, and she is a fourth-year medical student, and she's going to talk a little. She actually testified for the bill, the Senate Bill 45. Anyway, so she's going to be telling us a little bit about how she sees the future of healthcare. Welcome.
Her name is Claudia.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kavya. I hope my big face on Zoom isn't scaring too many of you away. Thank you for having me or letting me speak today. This is really happy to hear all the talk so far. When people often, I think, ask me why I joined the universal healthcare space, I often tell them the story about how I became radicalized after having appendicitis, which is when my appendix became infected. It was actually the Sunday before all of the COVID lockdowns happened, and I was having excruciating pain, the classic symptoms, right-sided, lower quadrant. And my dad was like, okay, we're going to go to the emergency department. And he did his due diligence. He took the time to actually call our insurance company. It was a new, network. He called and he wanted to verify that the place we went to was actually in network. I was like, it was pretty uncomfortable, and we still were like, let's just do the phone calls and make sure because we don't want to get any surprise bills. And so I had my surgery, went to the hospital, and the end of the month, the bills start rolling in. And at this point, I was doing all remote school because of the pandemic. And so I was just like really on top of it. I was like, these insurance companies aren't going to get a cent more than me. I made sure I was tracking the bills. I was making sure, everything kind of added up, or so I thought, because by the end of the next month, I received another bill. And this one was for $5,000 for the wonderful surgeon who did my procedure. And it turns out that the the physical facility I went to was covered, but the surgeon himself wasn't in network. And I think it's a story that many of us can either relate to or know people that have been affected by the holes in the system. And it honestly felt like a slap in the face because after weeks of kind of, working with everyone and navigating all the paperwork, I just was like, I refuse to accept this. And so I sent 3 appeal letters. I spent 6 months on the phone with the clerk at this office, calling her on the first Friday of every month to tell her that I cannot pay this bill because this was not disclosed to me in the beginning, and this is a surprise bill. And eventually, I think at the end of the 8 months, they finally waived it, not because they accepted that it was an error or a lack of communication, but because they were kind of tired of me and they were like, we're just going to close this and we want to be done. And I reflect a lot on that experience because I always used to think, I got really lucky, right? What if I wasn't a student? What if I was working and not able to make all those phone calls during business hours? What if I didn't speak English fluently? What if I didn't understand the incredibly complex insurance jargon and terminology that people are forced to navigate every day when interacting with what should be very simple? I realized, so many of these what ifs aren't hypothetical for a lot of people. They're just the harsh realities of the broken system that we're interacting with. And so fast forward a few years, I'm finally in medical school. It's my second year. I'm doing clinical rotations. I'm really excited to start seeing patients. I did them at an urban safety net hospital that largely served folks who were on Medicaid or folks who were just uninsured or underinsured. And that's where I really truly started to see all the what ifs just happen for people. I saw firsthand the system just failing people over and over again. I remember doing rounds, which is when the team kind of walks around and goes to talk to the patients, tell them about our plan for the day. And we would have 2 patients in the same room with the same disease processes receiving different treatment plans because their insurance covered different things. And I think it's a really heartbreaking realization that I had and a lot of my medical student colleagues had, to know that the textbooks or that your teachers are telling you, hey, or the research is telling you this medicine is the better thing. It's more effective. It's going to be better for their quality of life. And that we say, but we're going to end up doing this because of they're on this, they're on TRICARE, they're on Medicare, they're on Medicaid, whatever. And I know Dr. Jacobs just went through some horror stories, but I also wanted to, just share a similar experience with a patient I had who just really stuck with me. It was a man who had been diagnosed with a rare bone marrow disorder, and he was $9 over the cap for Medicaid, so was not eligible, couldn't afford the ACA premiums, which tend to be pretty regressive. And this was already a man who was juggling 3 jobs just to pay rent and eat. And he needed a medication to prevent blood clots for this medical condition, which was a common complication, but it was just too expensive and he couldn't afford it. And so I saw him in clinic in the fall, and months later in the winter, I see him again, and this time it's in the emergency department. And by this point, it was too late. He had a clot in his toe. The blood supply had been compromised. His toe was it was necrotic, it was black, it was peeling, it was incredibly painful. And we needed to hospitalize him to do some workup. And he didn't want to because he couldn't afford to miss work. Because if he did, he would lose his job and then with it, his insurance. And so I saw this gentleman again and again and again throughout the year in the clinic, in the ER, in just various stages of his disease being uncontrolled, unfortunately. And I couldn't shake the thought that the system is failing this man. And I wasn't the only one feeling this way. I know Dr. Jacobs kind of hit on moral injury, right? I could see that many, students and providers who I were working with who wanted to offer healing and care instead started to feel like complicit in a system that prioritizes profits over patients. And I kept wondering that, people who come into this field wanting to trust, wanting to build relationships that are built on empathy and are built on just having the time to listen to someone's story was totally just being lost because of the way things are structured. And, we're left navigating a maze of policies, of terminology that obscure instead of clarifying what people should be receiving in their healthcare that they're paying for. But even in the hardest times, I've seen some glimpses of light in the system. Programs like Medicaid and Medicare, even though, imperfect, offer clarity. They offer protection for many, low cost, free access to care, subsidized medications, or financial protections from catastrophic events are all features of these things that offer a level of stability that's really hard to come by in our current fragmented profit-driven system. And so to answer Kathy's true question here, right, where the future is, I dream of a future where we build on these foundations like Medicaid and Medicare, which is why I'm a strong advocate for a system like Medicare for all, single payer, a future where healthcare is treated as a human right, not a business interest, not a commodity to be bought or sold, and a future where, like the gentleman I worked with for a year, a future where no one has to make the heartbreaking or impossible choice of going to work or getting life-saving care. And I know that no system is perfect, but I refuse to accept the one we have now. It's a system that fails patients when they're in their most vulnerable moments and always somehow seems to work for the C-suite executives. So I'm fighting for a future with a lot of the groups I'm involved in, Students for a National Healthcare Program, which is the student arm of PNHB, and Healthcare for All Colorado, for a future where providers and patients can focus on healing and where everyone can access the care they deserve. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, Avia. All right, now we will take questions. And if we don't get to your question, there is no cards in the back and you can write your questions on there and we will have one of our, we'll get answers for you. So who has question?
I guess, earlier you guys asked for hope, and I didn't have much until I heard that last speaker. That's pretty hopeful.
Yeah, it is.
I guess my question is, all of this seems to be embedded in a larger issue, which is power, greed, and unfettered capitalism. And I guess we need to attack the problems where they are. I just feel like it's a little bit like whack-a-mole. If we don't look at the bigger issue, and I do not believe that John Elway should live right next to me at 68 and Kipling. I think that there's a place to celebrate talent and hard work, but anyway, so I don't know if that's a question or a statement, but I feel like this is a manifestation of power, greed, and unfettered capitalism in healthcare. We didn't talk about mental health care a little bit of, anyway, sorry.
You're absolutely right. Greed is the whole, it undermines everything we're talking about in healthcare. How do you overcome it? The only way I could see in overcoming it is if we could educate enough people who vote. Because the only thing that could overcome all these billions of special interest dollars is votes. And that's a hard thing to do, because even Trump admitted healthcare is complicated, he said. And it's so complex. I've been looking at this for almost 40 years, and every day I see something different happening, and most of it is not good. Because people are just, we have the worst outcomes of any developed country in the world. We have very little access to care. People are getting ripped off one way or another for everything. And we got to put a stop to it. And the universal single payer is the only way to go. But of course, that's evil socialized medicine, which it isn't. It's social insurance, which is different.
One thing I would add to that, when I first started working for universal single payer healthcare, people were like, well, my insurance is just fine. And I heard that over and over again. And I'm thinking that we hopefully have hit a tipping point where so many people are dealing with the complexities just to get routine care and are frustrated and angry. And that was part of the reaction to the killing of the CEO.
The reason they say that is 150 million people are covered by employer insurance plans. Yeah. And the employers are paying probably 3/4 of the premiums, which is now $25,000 a year for a family of 4. And they never use their insurance. Where the rubber hits the road is if somebody gets really sick and has to use the insurance. And then they realize how underinsured we are.
Yeah, so we have a question or a statement from the Zoom audience.
Okay.
Maddie?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to also comment on what's being said. First of all, I totally agree that to change this, because the underlying system, which is across the board, which is, I assume people know what intersectional justice is. This is just part of that. We are the healthcare wing of the social justice movement. However, when people say it's complicated, that's just because they don't want to do it and they don't want to give up their profits. In fact, all of the other industrialized countries in the world have done this, and some have done it very quickly. For example, Taiwan did it in the 1990s, and they hired a consultant who happened to be a guy from Harvard, and they looked at all the possibilities being done around the world for universal healthcare systems, and they chose to model it on the Canadian system. And at that point, Taiwan had a conservative government in place, and they rolled it out in 9 months because the party in power, the conservative party in power, wanted it to be in place before the next elections. So it doesn't have to be complicated. We make it that way because the powers that be don't want it to happen.
Well, Maddie, we also have two questions for you from Zoom. The first is with reference to the bill that you were talking about. Is the governor on board?
That's a really good question. We keep asking that, and his spokespeople keep saying he is. We'll find out. Because he said he was all for improved Medicare for all when he was running for election, but as soon as he got into office, he started backpedaling. So I don't know about him. I hope he is, and he says he is. So, or his spokespeople are saying that.
The next question, you talked about basically private fundraising because the state at this point with a $1 billion deficit can't afford it. So the question is, does fundraising for the system analysis have to wait until the bill is passed? When will it be known if the bill is passed or rejected? And if passed, how much time will there be to raise $750,000?
Well, the good news is that one of our fellow activists has a friend who's a professional fundraiser. And much to our amazement, she said to us, oh, we could raise this in 6 months. And they do want, money is going to be given to the School of Public Health who did the first study as well. And they already have a modeling system for it. And so we're hoping we can do it. They do want us to wait until it passes. And I understand that. But hopefully it will continue to go through. The House sponsors feel that it will pass. And then it'll be up to Polis.
But then they'll do nothing with the results because of special interest money. That's the problem.
That is a problem, but that's why we need to be educating people full bore. I mean, we don't have to wait to raise the money before we continue our education of the populace. And one thing that really does give me some hope is that from when I started working on Colorado Care back in 2017, and I've been a PNHP member for much longer, people actually know what single payer is now. Or not everybody, but a lot of people do, way more than used to. And so it is, and then the reaction to the United Healthcare murder, as was said at the beginning, there's a lot of anger about healthcare, and people are beginning to have their eyes open. The big bugaboo right now is the federal level, because they will probably be blocking this any way they can.
They take away Medicare funding to Medicaid to any degree, we will have a true healthcare crisis. 65% of people in nursing homes are funded by Medicaid.
That's right. And a lot of children's healthcare is.
Children, especially those with special needs. That money could just go away overnight.
Allison.
Come up front. Actually, that's good right there.
Okay. I just wanted to ask, I know some other states have gone ahead with state level single payer systems. Massachusetts, California, I don't know what others. Does anybody know how that's gone and
Massachusetts has essentially Obamacare. That's not a single payer publicly funded Medicare for.
I have a friend who's on it and she said that more and more providers are backing out of that in Massachusetts.
And California were close to passing universal health care for the state. And each time it failed by 1 or 2 votes at the last minute because of the special interest.
Are there other examples of states where it's been used and is successful? I mean, what makes us think that we can do it right?
Oregon and Washington are moving forward on that, and Vermont actually passed the bill, but it died. It was very complicated. I don't understand. It had to do with how they were fund everything, and it died. Didn't go anywhere. The real answer is federal, not state. I mean, people say, well, if a state does it, then it'll be like Canada, where one province did it and then all the others came in line. But here it's, the real answer is gonna have to be federal ultimately. Hopefully, we can start it with states.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maddie, does Maddie have her hand up?
Yep.
Yeah, I just have another comment about that. Actually, multiple states are working on this. And the problem at the federal level is getting a waiver so that we can get federal, because a lot of money that pays for healthcare is federal money, $6 out of $10. And so we need to get that waiver. There are some things in the ACA that say if a state comes up with a plan that has better coverage than the ACA, then they can get the waiver. In addition to which, Ro Khanna put forward a bill that would make it easier to get federal waivers. Of course, with what's going on now, who knows what's going to happen? But there are a lot of states working on this, and there's actually an organization called One Payer States who are keeping track of all the state level initiatives.
Is it possible that the states who want to pass this can work together, band together to try to proceed?
That's actually one thing that OPS does. And yes, the answer is yes, we're trying to do that. So we'll see how that goes. Oh, and there was another comment earlier about mental health. So one of the things for our bill that we're pushing through now is something called the 10 Essentials. And if you go to our website, couniversalhealth.org, those are listed. That is a very comprehensive plan that would include mental health, dental, hearing aids, eye care, and so on. And so if you're interested in what is being looked at for the model legislation they're going to be analyzing, that is available on our website.
The other model legislation is gonna look at is long-term care. Cost $100,000 a year now for a nurse.
But the thing about that is the reason it's $100,000 a year is they can get away with that. It's kind of like the $17,000 for a $70 drug.
Tied to private corporations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Allison?
I had a question for Kavya, but is she still on?
Hi there. Yes, I am.
Okay, cool. I just couldn't see your name. I was wondering how, like you're obviously very passionate and you're young in medical school. How are your other colleagues or peers in medical school feeling about this as they're entering into the healthcare system? Are they jaded? Are they hopeful? I mean, how are your peers feeling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say, at least from the couple of medical students that are involved in SNAP, which is like our student advocacy group for this cause, I think people are really hopeful, honestly. I think they are just so, invigorated by some of the experiences that they've had. And just kind of echoing what you guys were just talking about other efforts in other states. And just I think there's a sentiment I think in just society generally that change has to be made. And so I think people are hopeful. How we get there, the exact path, I think there's a lot of uncertainty about. Times it does feel a little daunting because we ask ourselves if this can even be accomplished. But I would say for the most part, folks who are paying attention, who know what single payer means, who know what is going on in the policy world, are pretty hopeful.
Awesome. And then I just had a comment too about like advocacy and what we can do. I think a lot of times it can feel daunting to just be like, we should have single payer healthcare. But like when we're having these discussions with family members who are like, I just got a bill for this, isn't that ridiculous? Because I feel like even people who don't fully understand, we've all gotten a surprise bill. And I've had conversations with like a sister-in-law who isn't quite maybe like on the progressive train, but like who, she's had those surprise bills, and then I've been able to like stem that conversation into, wouldn't it be nice if we had a single payer and weren't beholden to these insurance companies? So like have these conversations with your family and friends as that comes up. So
Well, you can
that's
appeal.
part of the education.
Every hospital has an appeals process, and upfront they'll discount it, I don't know, a certain amount. That's where to start. But if you really have this huge bill like that $60,000 helicopter bill, the way that got taken care of is they went to the press.
Right.
The problem is the press isn't jumping on a lot of this stuff. And you gotta wonder about all the money the news stations and TV and radio stations are taking from healthcare. You know, they're not doing investigations on all these outrageous bills like they should be.
I
think you
just want to mention there is a 2007 film, almost 20 years now, from Michael Moore called Sicko.
Yeah.
And things have only gotten worse since.
Yes.
So if you ever want to mobilize people, if you don't have fantastic speakers like these three here at hand, show that film. People get upset when they see it.
Donna Moore, who's here in Colorado and who's a member of our organization, she was one of the stars because she and her husband lost their jobs and went bankrupt because of healthcare bills. That was the illustration of all the healthcare bankruptcy, which is over $500,000 patients a year right now.
So, Madeleine?
Yeah, I just want to let you guys know, there's a lot of really good stuff out there showing just how screwed up the system is. But I think one of the really important things is people say, there's no way we can fix this. And that's just not true. It's, this is the only country that people have to deal with these obstacles. We just had a webinar this week for medical professionals that was called Denied, and it's comparing what the United States has to put up with versus Canada and Germany. One of our panelists he's a Canadian, and what he was shocked by when he moved here with the healthcare system. Another panelist actually has experience working the back part of this and how onerous that is, and has this amazing story how the first thing that happens when a patient would walk into their practice is they throw all these cards at her. I don't understand this. You figure it out for insurance. And, one of the really prominent things about that webinar is showing that people don't have to know what deductibles and co-insurance and co-pays and provider networks are in any of these other countries. Those are all obstacles that are made to avoid paying for healthcare.
I have a question, and I've been raising my hand. The one issue that when I talk to my conservative buddies, the one issue that always comes up is I don't want to pay for those brown-skinned, black-skinned people. I mean, that is the number one thing that people that vote against Obamacare or anything else, that's the number one issue for middle-class people to not vote for single-payer healthcare. I don't want to vote for the black and brown people, but I don't see any propaganda here that addresses that.
They are paying for them and they don't know it.
Well, I know that.
Paying for
I know
them
that that's
by
what you're doing, but I haven't, on this whole discussion, that never came up. So are you going to start addressing that, or do you see that as an issue?
Well, that's the whole bottom line here. Healthcare in every other country in the world is a right, not a privilege.
Okay, and the countries you listed are all very mono-ethnic. Like Taiwan, mostly Taiwanese. Japan, mostly Japanese. Germany, mostly German, and they're getting sick of their public health care because there's so many immigrants coming in. England was the first to get public health care. They loved it until they got a bunch of immigrants coming in, and then they started hating. Then they started getting a little upset with it. And Canada, I have a lot of friends up in Canada, and they're getting kind of tired of their public health care too, because there's a bunch of immigrants coming in. So we got to address, I think, part of the propaganda issue. Talk. We can't just sit here in our own little silo and talk about how wonderful we have public health care if we're not going to get out and talk to the people that hate
with
brown people.
single payer, the way most models are, if you work and you pay taxes, you pay for your health insurance premiums. And that takes that argument away. If everybody's paying whatever percentage is agreed upon, hopefully a progressive type of thing, everybody who works pays for health insurance. Most immigrants work. Surprise, huh?
Yeah, I get that, but I don't wanna pay for them,
I don't know, Mike.
right? See what I'm
Well,
saying?
that's the way you.
That's
avoid
why I
paying for
voted,
them
that's
is
why I
make
voted,
them-
so you gotta get your message out to those.
Make them
I
pay
think what
insurance.
Mike's trying to say in order to solve a lot of these problems, everywhere from, infrastructure to schools to whatever, the fighting unfettered capitalism, we need to address the race issue. And,
Yeah,
but I don't know how
there is
to
a
do
lot of overlap
Yeah.
here with social justice and, also climate change, climate change, homelessness. Where's Mindy?
Not here today.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of interaction and I thank you for that point. There is the Arvadans for Social Justice. And, I have a hard time because there's so many different things, but I think that is an important thing to address. And there are also, if you want to put that on a little note card and we can get back to you on that. And if other people have questions that you haven't gotten, or write it in the chat and we'll get those to you.
I just had a comment.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, I've worked as a tour guide and I've taken people to the Americans, tourists, okay, to emergency rooms in Germany and in Switzerland and in Spain and in Taiwan and in Quebec. And in each of those circumstances, those Americans were treated immediately. Okay, they were just taken in and taken care of. And they had, because they weren't part of the healthcare system, they were billed in separately later on.
Okay.
But my personal experience with this, and this is also recent, in both Quebec City and in Montreal, that, being black or brown, that's not a huge issue. There are a whole lot of very, very poor white people. We tend to forget that. So I just wanted to say it's a good world out there and we can join it.
My wife was sitting here. We were in Copenhagen to go on a tour, a vacation, and she got ill. We went to the government hospital. When we checked in, I said, how do we pay? They said, you tourists, show us your passport, we'll copy it and we'll take care of you. She got no bill for 3 days in the hospital. In Copenhagen. So next time she gets sick, we're going to Copenhagen.
And I think, Mike, another comment on that is what I think you were talking to is the majority of people on Medicaid and Medicare are white or rural.
I know that.
I know, but that's the pushback. Like when your friends say, I don't want to pay for these people, it's like, it's not, if we were all paying taxes for a collective healthcare, there would not be, this person isn't paying because it wouldn't be insurance.
My issue
right?
is the propaganda we're using.
Sure, absolutely.
Our arguments aren't getting out there.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Sorry,
we are
we have
supposed to
to
end our meetings at
finish.
5:30. And so we're gonna do a conclusion from Kathy, and then you can continue this conversation with each other if you're able to stay.
Thank you to our speakers, Maddie and Fabia. So action that you can do, urge your House representative to support, Senate Bill 25045, healthcare payment system analysis. And then the other thing we talked about, when people complain about the high cost of healthcare or surprise bills, let them know that there is a solution and how to get more information. And our healthcare team meets monthly on the second or third Saturday on Zoom, so you can join our group and there's more information here, the different flyers. There's a flyer on history, some of the history of the healthcare movement. So thank you all for coming and really appreciate all your questions and support and
Our next meeting is going to be on a Sunday. We'll put that on the Facebook and website and so forth. And it will focus on new members. So if you're at your first or second or third meeting, it will give you a chance to meet with our team leaders. So if you're interested in climate, you can sit at the table with Darlon. If you're interested in politics, you can sit at the table with Joyce. And you can move around and try different ones. That's all our next meeting is. And so please come back a month and 5 days from now.
I'll make my slides available if any of you want to use any of them to organize your own talks.
Perfect. Great.
Okay.
I can see that.
Great. That was really good. Thank you for putting this together.